In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the parking brake shoes on the back of this Chevy Silverado 2500. Let's install these brand new TRQ shoes. Let's remove the wheel. First, if your truck has these, remove your center caps with a 22mm socket. These are just plastic mounting nuts, so be careful with them. You don't want to break them. Take this off and set it aside. Now remove all 8 of your 22mm lug nuts. If your wheel is stuck like this one, put one lug nut back on for safety, and then take a rubber mallet and tap it with that rubber mallet on the tire, not on the rim, from the backside. There we go. The lug nut held that wheel on so it doesn't fall off. Now take it off and remove the wheel. With a 21mm socket, let's remove the entire caliper and bracket assembly off of the rear axle. I'm going to leave this bolt in a couple turns to hold the caliper while I take off the top bolt, which unfortunately I cannot fit a power tool in, so I'm going to have to do that one by hand. Have a long ratchet or a long breaker bar ready to break this free. Take this bolt out, support the caliper, take the lower bolt out, flip the caliper over on top of the leaf spring. Make sure you don't pull on this brake hose and put no pressure on it. It will damage it if you do that. At this point, you should be able to pull the rotor off. However, ours is seized on this hub, so I'm going to put in 2 bolts. They're 8x125 thread. Thread them in until they bottom out into these threaded holes here, and this is going to help you pull the rotor off. So as you thread these bolts in, it'll push on the hub, push the rotor off. Go back and forth. This should apply even pressure. All right, that's off. Take my bolts out. Take the rotor off. At the top, you'll notice a spring on top of this adjuster wheel, and I'm going to pry the spring up in order to release some pressure off of this, and then turn this cog wheel so that I can compress the shoes together. This will release some tension off of it. Now, if your parking brakes were really stuck when removing the rotor, you could pop off this little boot from the back and do exactly this, just from the outside. So it will be a little more difficult, but as long as they're adjusted properly, you shouldn't necessarily need to do that unless the rotor is extremely worn. That's bottomed out. Now I'm going to pry these shoes apart. The adjuster should fall out. This will also release our spring. Now we have to remove the retainer springs off of the shoes here and the caps. This is what holds it on to this backing plate. I'm going to lock on some needle-nose pliers, needle-nose locking pliers that is, so I can push on this spring or on the cap and the spring at the same time. Give it a couple twists. It needs to turn 90 degrees before it can pop off. It might be a little challenging here, seeing that we have very limited space. I'm holding the pin from the backside. As you can see, this popped off. I can remove the spring, which is broken, and this pin is bent. On my other shoe, everything is actually broken, so we will definitely need new hardware. Take all of this off. This shoe is free now, except for the bottom springs. Do the same thing on the other side. Now from the bottom, I'm going to pry the shoes apart and get them off of this parking brake pivot. Stick a pry bar in here. Just carefully pry these off. Okay, let's do the same on this side. Now you should be able to kind of peel them off and down. I'm going to take a screwdriver now and pop off the inner spring. Okay, just like that. Now you should be able to get this shoe off. And now you can get the rest of this off of here. Try to pry the inner spring off on the other side as well. That's going to release the other side shoe, and there we go. This is your parking brake pivot here, so when you pull on the, or press the pedal, cable pulls and activates this, and it's supposed to pivot. Well, mine's pretty much seized. It does this just because it's wobbling back and forth, but these are two different pieces that are supposed to pivot on each other. Like I said, mine's seized, so I have to fix it. I cannot put parking brake shoes on like this, or they will basically not work and not function as they should. So let's go on the back side and remove the cable from the pivot. Here you can see the cable on the back that I've already sprayed with rust penetrant. It is not seized in this bracket here. A lot of times that happens. And at this point, we just have to pop it out so we can swing it and unhook it from the parking brake pivot. So pull this back. You might find it helpful to have something to pry out with. There we go. Get this off of here. There we go. And from the front side, you can pull out this pivot. If yours was seized like mine, you would just put it in a vise and tap it back and forth with a hammer, and it should free up. I put this in my vise, hammered it back and forth with some rust penetrant, and broke it free. If you cannot break this free, do not reinstall it as is, get a new one, because you have to have this functioning in order for the parking brake shoes to function properly. Now that it's cleaned off and freed up, I'm going to lubricate it a little bit. Going to put some silicone paste. You can use brake grease if that's what you have. You just need something that's rated for higher temperatures so that it can actually withstand as the brakes heat up and last, keep this lubricated and prevent it from seizing. Put the parking brake pivot back through here, and let's hook on the cable. I have the spring held on with some locking pliers here, so I can slide the end of the cable right through this slot, and as soon as it goes through, I can release it. All right, so that's in there. Now we just have to pull the spring back down this way so we can get this end of the cable through that bracket. This is personal preference, but this vehicle lives in a rusty climate. I like to put a little bit of anti-seize grease in here to prevent this from seizing up in the future. There we go. I have to replace my hardware, so I have to get this spring out. You can reuse any hardware that you have that is in good condition, but as you saw, my springs and the retainers were broken, so I got new hardware. To take this spring out, you have to basically just shimmy it until it pops out from underneath this ABS tone ring. And there it is. I have a new one ready. All these springs at the bottom are the same, inner, outer, left, right, so it doesn't matter which one you pick. Push it back until it goes into its spot here behind this tone ring, and it'll kind of just sit here waiting for the pads. Take a wire brush, clean up the backing shield or the backing plate here where the e-brake shoes will sit. I'm just trying to get off some of this scaly rust so that the shoes can sit on a flat surface. I'm going to use some brake parts cleaner to minimize the dust. Rinse it off. Add some of that same brake grease or silicone paste that you used earlier. You'll see some parts that are raised here, and that's exactly where you want to apply it, not all over the place, and only a thin layer so that you can prevent any squeaks as the brake shoes operate. Just over here, and a little bit up top, and of course we'll do the same symmetrically on the other side. Now take your shoe. I'm going to start with this one on this side. Doesn't matter which one you start with. And I'm going to start with the inner spring and hook that in first. Bring the shoe over. It's going to be fairly difficult to see at this point. Once you get it poking through that hole, try to press it in the rest of the way. All right, it was fairly difficult, but I got that spring hooked in. Do the same to the other side. Now I'm going to put the outer spring on with the shoes still the way they are, not completely seated. Try and hook the spring onto here. Okay, so that spring's hooked on, and oh, it fell out. You have to hook it onto both sides in order for it to be locked in. I got the spring hooked on. Now we have to grab a longer pry bar, spread these apart, and seat them into position. Keep in mind the top of the springs is not held on, so try not to get them to fall off. Okay, there's one. There we go. Check both sides. Okay, pull on the cable. That moves and the shoes are seated. Perfect. Now let's lock them in with the spring and the pins. Now let's stick the pins and the springs through. The pin goes in from the back side, and this is going to be fairly difficult to see and to do, but you can hold the pin with one hand, sneak the spring in with the other hand, and then I have the cap on a set of locking pliers. Just like when I removed it, I'm going to try and squeeze the spring and turn the pin. I have a new adjuster here, but of course if you were reusing your old one, you would do the same exact thing. You would want to grease it up, put a little bit of grease on the threads here, put a little bit on these threads as well. Thread these two together to get the grease worked into the threads all the way down. Any excess can be wiped off. There we go. Let's get the top spring on. Hook it onto its corresponding hooks here. And now put the adjuster in. The adjuster doesn't have to go in any specific direction. However, I prefer to put it back the same exact way it came out, because if you work on your truck and you're used to spinning it one way to adjust it, well, it's probably good to have it the same way. Otherwise, you'll get a little confused next time you go to spin this. The reason I put the spring on first is because I found it more difficult to have to hook it on after the adjuster's on. But if you want it to wait to put the spring on, you can do that as well. There we go. That adjuster's sitting in here perfectly. Now I will not adjust the shoes, of course, until the rotor's on, so I'm going to leave this bottomed out. These are new shoes, so they are at their maximum thickness, so they should be fairly close already, but of course we're going to do the adjustment with the rotor on. Now let's clean the hub surface where the rotor sits so that when I put the rotor on, it is nice and flat. I don't want any rust buildup here. Mine doesn't look too bad. The rotor was a little bit stuck on here, so I'm going to focus on this ridge here where the rotor actually sits on the center of the hub. But the rest of it is actually in good condition, so I'm not too worried once again. If you need to sand it down, be very careful not to remove too much material. I'm just going to go in with a wire brush and clean it up. Rinse this off with brake parts cleaner. Now it's a good idea to coat this with an anti-corrosive coating. I like to use anti-seize for this. Try not to get it on the lug studs. Now let's get the rotor on. If you're reusing your old rotor, clean it up. If you're not, just slide it on. And we have to adjust the parking brake shoes now so that they can actually grab on. Well, you don't want them to grab on just yet. You want them to be close so that as soon as you press on that parking brake pedal, it actually locks up the rotor. From what it seems like right now, I can't even hear them touch, so I do need to push them out a little bit so that they at least get close. What you want to hear is just the lightest amount of friction, maybe not constant friction, but you want them to be very close, like I said, so that it does not take a lot of pedal travel for them to lock up. To adjust the parking brake shoes, it's easiest if you just pull the rotor back off and you access it from the inside here. You can do this later through the back side where that grommet is, but this is going to be a lot easier since we have easy access now. Lift up on that spring and just turn the adjuster a couple turns so you can get the parking brake shoes expanded a little bit. And then of course we will test again. This is just a matter of trial and error here until you get it close enough. And the best way to test this really is to put at least 2 lug nuts on, one on each side, or across from the other one, so that you can actually seat the rotor flush up against the hub. You don't need to make them very tight, just need to bottom them out. And then if you have a hard time spinning the whole hub by hand, especially if the other side is still on, you can take a little pry bar and you can see that it easily spins. Doesn't have a lot of resistance to it. Spins freely, and you can just barely hear these parking brake shoes touch. At this point, if you wanted to, you could engage that parking brake a couple times, seat the shoes, and then test it out by spinning it. And then you can lock it up and put a big pry bar through here. And if you can't turn this with a big pry bar and the parking brake shoes engaged, you know it's adjusted properly. Now grab your caliper, slide it over the rotor. Okay. Start in the bottom. Snug these bolts up. The top will have to be done by hand because there's no space for an air tool. 221 is the torque for both of these bolts. There's 1 and 2. Let's get the wheel on. Put on all 8 of your lug nuts, bottom them out in a cross pattern, and then also in a cross pattern, we're going to torque them to 140 foot-pounds. Once again, 140 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Put your center cap on if your truck has this, and with the same socket you used for the lug nuts, tighten these up just by hand, make them snug. These are plastic. If you strip them out once, they probably won't hold anymore. So just go in a cross pattern, that way this seats evenly. Tighten these up. They kind of click in place once they're locked in, so that's how you know.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.